Do you want to learn how to create next and previous links for your Ruby on Rails application? Then stick around to find out how. I'm Thomas, and this is Bear with Brain Trust Digital. We're full-stack web developers obsessed with learning. If you're interested in learning about full-stack web development, please consider subscribing below. If you have a friend who you think may be interested in this type of content and you're willing to share, we'd really appreciate it. In this AWS Rails tutorial, we're going to do something a bit different. We're going to use test-driven development, or TDD, to create the next and previous video feature. We'll add these on as links on the video show page. We're using RSpec for our test suite, so I'll link those setup videos in the card as well as the description below. But the same high-level concepts apply no matter what your preferred test suite is. We'll walk through some testing terminology and of course add the next and previous code feature. But the primary purpose here is to give more context into why I'm making the choices I make, as well as see the process of test-driven development. As a result, this video is a bit longer, but I feel like there's some value in understanding why and seeing that process. So if this sounds like something you might be interested in, then stick around for the tutorial, where we walk through how to add next and previous links through test-driven development. As you can see, we're in our AWS Rails application. The first thing we're going to want to do before we get started here is ensure that we have a clean and passing test suite. In our case, that means RSpec. If you need help installing RSpec, I have a tutorial covering this topic that I'll link in the card as well as the description below. To do so, we're going to run RSpec spec. In our case, we just have one simple example. Now that we've confirmed all our examples are passing, let's go ahead and create a new Git branch for our feature. We'll do this with get checkout-b, and then we're going to call our branch next previous links. I've also covered Git and GitHub in a previous tutorial, so I'll link that in the card and the description as well. Before we get started, we need to run a few migrations. Next and previous, for our purposes, will be controlled by the video's position. Let's go ahead and create a migration to add that position now. To do so, you'd run Rails G migration, add position to videos, then you're going to pass position, which is of type integer. This will create a migration that we can view in Sublime Text. It will add the column to the videos table, position integer, just as we requested via the migration. You can name the column whatever you'd like. I just tend to name this position, and it's something I've done for years now. In fact, I do it so often that I've already created videos with position, having the assumption that at some point I'd want to sort them. So for now, I'm going to delete this migration as it's already part of my data model. Next, we're going to create one more migration. This migration will have the code to set a default position for all of our videos. So in this case, we're just going to run Rails G migration, set video position defaults. We're not going to pass any values in here, and we're not using the conventional syntax, so we'll have to define the contents of this migration. As you can see, this is just an empty migration. So let's go ahead and paste our code in now. We're going to switch from a change to up and down directions for this migration, as the up and down are very different. Within the up, we're going to loop through each video with an index. We're going to find that video by ID and then update the position to the index +1. This will populate all of our videos with a reasonable position. For the down method, we're just going to update all videos with a position of nil. Let's flip over to the terminal and run our migration now. We'll do so with Rails db:/migrate. Here to confirm things worked as we expected, we can jump into the console real quick. Say the video.first.position is 1. Similarly, if we checked out the last video, it's position 13, which should be the same as our count. Perfect, it looks like things are working as we'd expect. Let's go ahead and create a new spec for our video model. We'll do so with the RSpec generator, Rails G RSpec model, video. In a previous tutorial, we installed Factory Bot. During that tutorial, we created a factory for our videos. So as you can see, this is a conflict here. Since we've already taken the time to create a video factory, let's say no here and skip this. We do not want to override our current factory. So in this case, the generator is just going to create our video spec. Let's flip over to Sublime Text and see the new spec. Here in Sublime Text, we can navigate to Spec, Models, and then open the video spec. As you can see, the generator has filled in this spec with boilerplate pending code. Instead, we're going to delete this. Within your specs, you'd like to try and follow the basic convention: setup, action, assertion, and teardown. While all of these steps may not always occur in your spec, I thought it might be nice to point this out. Also, sometimes two steps may occur in one. Maybe your setup and action are the same line of code. That's perfectly fine, and that's very common. Maybe you don't need a teardown. Also, perfectly fine. So let's go ahead and remove those comments. Within our video model, we'd like to have a next method and a previous method. So let's go ahead and create describe blocks for those now. Common convention would say to create a describe block with the pound symbol and then the name of our intended method. In this case, we're using the pound symbol since it's an instance method. If this were a class method, convention would dictate we do so with a leading period. So first we're going to describe next, then we're going to describe previous. Within our describe blocks, we'll have our it blocks. In this case, when describing next, it returns the next sequential video by position. Similarly, when describing previous, it returns the previous sequential video by position. In a previous tutorial, we've discussed installing Factory Bot to allow us to create factories in our specs. If you need help installing Factory Bot or some of the basic usage and syntax, I'll link that video in the card as well as the description below. So for now, we're just going to paste in our factories. In this case, we're going to create and cache two specific video instances. For reference, I'll quickly display our video factory. In this case, it has a title, a YouTube ID, and it sequences the position. I want to explicitly control position here so that I can ensure the cached video in each instance has the exact position I expect so that we can test these methods. This would be considered the setup portion of our spec. In our case, the action and assertion would occur in the exact same line. Here, we're going to expect video1.next to equal video2. There is no teardown. As you might assume, the previous method is very similar. So let's go ahead and just copy the above and paste below. The difference here is that we want to start on video 2, we want to call previous, and then we expect video 1 to be returned. So let's go ahead and flip over to the terminal and run our specs. We'll do so with RSpec spec. As you can see, we get an undefined method next and an undefined method for previous. Let's resolve that now. To do so, we need to open up our video model under app, models, video, and then we'll create our new methods. Now that we've created our empty methods, if we flip back over to the terminal and rerun our specs, you'll see that we get a different error. As you can see, our spec fails, but that makes sense, right? They're just empty methods. So let's go ahead and write the code to pass each spec. Here in our video model for next, we can paste in our code. Here we're setting new position to a value of the current video's position +1. Then we're going to go ahead and find the video with that new position and return it. If we flip back over to the terminal and rerun our specs, you can see now we have 3 examples but only 1 failure. The next method passed its specs. Flipping back to Sublime Text, we're going to go ahead and fix the previous method now. Here in the previous method, the code's pretty similar. It's what you'd expect. We're going to have a new position, decrement it by 1, and then find the video at that position and return. The console, if we run the specs, you can see we're all green, all 3 pass. Now that we've confirmed our specs are passing, let's flip over to Sublime and see if there are any opportunities to refactor. So as you can see in each it block, we are creating the same videos, video 1 and video 2. Here's an opportunity where we could create a before block, like so. Then we can extract video 1 and video 2 and place them in this block. Here, let's clean up and get rid of the additional duplication there. The next thing we need to do here is set these to instance variables so that they can be used between the specs. Now, before our specs, we'll create 2 instance variables and then use those throughout the specs. Let's go ahead and ensure we're still green. Perfect. If we drop into a Rails console real quick and select the last video, and then we call the .next method on this video, we're gonna get nil. There's no video after the last video. Similarly, if we grabbed the first video and ran the previous method, we would also get nil. In this case, we'd like our next and previous to wrap, meaning if you call previous in the first video, it'll just circle back to the end of the list. And if you call next on the last video, it'll just circle back to the front of the list. So let's break out of our console and go write the specs to test that now. So here within the next describe block, we're going to enter down and add a new context. Context just allows you to add a block that clarifies the specific situation you're going to be testing. So in our case, we're testing when on the last video. The net effect here is that this is very readable. We're describing the next method when on the last video, and then we'll add our it block. In this case, it returns the first video by position. Before writing our expectation, we're going to add a third video to our before block. This will just allow us to be more thorough in our testing. We're also going to add it out of order. This will help us to ensure that we actually are sorting by position and that it's not just a magic side effect of the fact that these are created in the proper order previous to adding this third video. So in this case, the expectation is that we expect video 3 or the last video when sorted by position .next to return to the first video. Let's flip over to the terminal and run our tests now. As you'd expect, and as we proved via the console, this fails. So let's go fix this code now in the video model. Here in the video model, after we set the new position, but before we find the video, we want to check if we're at the end of line, or rather the last video. So here we're just going to check if this new position is greater than the video count. Then we're going to go ahead and just reset the position to the front of the line. Now if we flip back over to the terminal and rerun our spec, you can see we're all green, we're passing. Now let's go handle the previous method where you're on the first video and you call the .previous method. We want to circle back to the end of the list. First, let's write the spec. Just like above in our next describe block, in our previous describe block, we're going to add an additional context. Here the context is when on the first video. What we're going to be expecting in this scenario is that it returns the last video by position. The expectation here is that we expect video 1.previous to equal video 3. If we flip over to the terminal, this should fail. Now let's go write the code in the video model to account for this. Similar to the next method, after we set our new position, but before we find our video, we're going to insert our new code. If the new position, after decrementing, is less than 1, we're just going to set the new position to the video count, aka the last video. And then we'll go ahead and find as we were before. If we flip back over to the terminal and rerun our specs, you can see everything passes. 5 examples, 0 failures. A common saying in test-driven development is red, green, refactor. Now that we've got our test suite passing, or green, it's time to see if there are any opportunities to refactor. If you look at our next and previous methods, they're actually very similar, especially when you think about them abstractly. In each one, the first line is we're setting a new position value to the current position plus a minor adjustment, plus or minus 1. Next, we have a conditional that determines whether or not we should reset this new position value. If true, in each case, we have a value that we reset that position value to. Finally, in both cases, we find the video by the determined position value. It feels like there's an opportunity to refactor here. Instead, we could create a third method. Let's call it determine video and pass in a few params. The first is position. That's very important to this method as it's used throughout next and previous. The next is should reset. This would be a Boolean value that determines whether or not we should be resetting the new position value. Finally, we'll need to pass in a reset value that says when we should reset, this is the value that we will reset it to. So the first line will be pretty similar to the previous two methods. We're going to set new position equal to the passed in position. Next, we'll determine if we need to reset. Since we're assuming should reset will be a Boolean value, we'll just throw that into a simple conditional. Just like in both methods above, if we should reset, we want to set new position to that reset value. Finally, like both methods above, we want to find the video by that new position. Now that we have our new method, let's go ahead and copy the method signature and see how we could use it in the next and previous methods. Here we're going to paste it just below the new position and fill in the values. So in this case, we're passing in our new position as the position value, our conditional that determines whether or not we need to reset, as well as the value that we would reset to. Once complete, we can delete the rest of this code. Similarly, if we copy the method signature again and paste just below the setting of new position for previous, we can fill in those values so that this also utilizes this new method. Here again, we're going to pass in new position. We can grab our conditional that determines if we should reset, as well as the value that we should reset to. That allows us to delete all the rest of this code. As you can see, there's a lot less repetition here, as all the repetitive code has been abstracted to the determine video method. Next and previous are merely calls that pass in some data to this abstract method. Anytime you refactor, you want to go back and run your test suite to make sure you didn't break anything. As you can see, we're still green, all tests are still passing, so you can feel confident that we haven't broken any of our functionality. Now that we've refactored our method successfully, let's go ahead and use it in the views. So here in app, views, videos, show, we'll drop in our new code. Basically, all we've added here is an unordered list of links, previous video and next video. Behind these links, we're using our new previous and next methods to determine the appropriate video to display in each case. Before we view this in the browser, I have one small bit of styling to add to the video's SCSS style sheet. Nothing too impressive here, just a bit of cleanup that'll present these links visually how I thought looked best. So if we flip over to the browser and then navigate to the videos section, and then click on a specific video, you can scroll down and see our new next and previous videos. So here we are on the first video. If we hit previous, we'd expect to go to the end of the list, and that worked as anticipated. Here, if we click next video, we should go back to the beginning of the list, and then we can continue to cycle through. Now that we've confirmed everything's functioning in the browser as we'd like, let's go ahead and flip back over to the terminal. Here, it's probably wise to run our tests one last time, just to ensure we have no unintended breaks. Now that we've confirmed that's green, let's go ahead and commit our code. First, we'll add it to stage for commit. Then we will commit the staged code with a message, adds next and previous links. Now we can push our code with get push. At this point, you would typically create a pull request, and if you have a teammate, you would request that they review this code for mistakes, style issues, or other inconsistencies. Since our teammate Bear is currently sleeping, we're gonna go ahead and merge this ourselves. To do so, we're gonna run get checkout master to get to the main branch. Next, we'll merge this new feature branch with get merge and then the branch name, next previous links in our case. Once this branch is merged, we can push this new merged branch up to our remote repository, GitHub, with get push. Finally, at this point, we can deploy our new code. We'll do so with bundle exec cap production deploy. As you can see, our Capistrano deployment has completed. If you need help creating a Capistrano deployment, I'll link to that video in the card as well as the description below. One important note here is Capistrano automatically runs our migrations for us. In my case, I already had a position column on my videos table since it's something I just typically do. So you won't see that migration run as that ran quite a while ago, but you will see me setting the default positions here. So all videos will have a proper sequential position. Finally, we can flip over to the browser to test this in production. Here, if I switch over to my AWS Rails tab, click refresh, and then navigate to the video section, click through to a video, and then scroll down, you can see the previous and next links. Here on the first video, if I click the previous link, I'm taken to the end of the list. As you can see, video with the ID of 13, as this is sorted last by position. If I click next, I'll be taken to the front of the list again, and then if I continue to click next, I'll cycle through my videos, just as we were hoping for. So I hope you've found this video useful, and if you have, if you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing, or sharing with a friend who you think may be interested in this type of content. Let me know in the comment section below how you feel about this new test-driven development style of video. I'm curious to hear people's opinions, as this obviously moves at a much slower pace, but it felt as though it would provide an immense amount of detail for those seeking that level of content. Also, I just wanted to try something new to see how people felt about it. As always, please leave your tutorial requests in the comment section below, and I'll catch you in the next AWS Rails tutorial.